You know, this is the problem with First Past the Post. It pitches parties against each other in a zero-sum, winner-takes-all game. It forces people to vote against what they don't want, instead of voting for what they do want. It leaves people in safe ridings feeling like their vote doesn't matter, because no matter what, the party that always wins will win yet again. I believe we should have a vibrant democracy where voters have a wide range of choice, where they can listen to prospective leaders, talk about their vision and ideas for the future, for how they will serve people and make life better for them. Under proportional representation, you get to vote with hope for what you actually want, instead of out of fear against what you don't want. Under proportional representation, parties will no longer be playing a zero-sum game, where they scramble to get 40% of the vote in order to get 100% of the power. Not only will this reduce the incentive to talk about vote splitting and strategic voting, but it will mean that after an election is over, parties will have to work together. There'll be an opportunity for government policy to be advanced in a number of ways that bring collaboration and compromise as the centerfold of this discussions. It will be like this rare occurrence we have now, where the minority government result required us to work together. And it's not easy being forced to work together, but it leads to better government policy. Look back at the leaders' debate in the lead up to the 2017 provincial election. I looked back at the interviews I did, and I looked back at where we are today, and I realized I did not think this was possible. I did not think after last election that it would be possible for the BC Greens and the BC NDP to work together collaboratively on so many issues. But what we did collectively is recognize that when we put the people of British Columbia ahead of our partisan values, when we actually focus on what we believe in and our shared values, we can get a lot done. I will say unequivocally that I really like John Horgan. We came from a place of tension to one where, frankly, I enjoyed spending about 45 minutes chatting with him about all sorts of things. It's a remarkable thing that can happen when you're forced to work together. It really, really is. You know, in the last 18 months, by focusing on our shared values, what have we done collectively? Big money gone, not only from provincial politics, but also from local politics. There's been absolutely historic investments in childcare and education. Well, we may have quibbled about some of the details, but the shared value was what we focused on. And we're really proud to work with the BC NDP on actually making this come to fruition. And this is highlighted by just what happened last week at the University of Victoria. For 16 years, the University of Victoria has been crying out for more student accommodation. Year after year, that was falling upon deaf ears. But just this last week, an enormous investment, which would have increased capacity at the University of Victoria by 25% for student housing, was taken by this government. And we're very grateful in Victoria for this, because it alleviates the affordability issue by getting hundreds and hundreds of students out of rental accommodation in the city, onto campus where they want to be, and freeing up that space in the city for all others to actually be part of. You know, 6 years ago, I was a climate scientist at the University of Victoria, having spent 25 years working in the field. I was a lead author in a number of UN panel reports on climate change. One after another, they called on world leaders to take action on climate attainment. Time and time again, nothing was done. You know, my students would tell me they were frustrated. climate change poses such a profound threat to their future. Why are politicians doing nothing about it? And I would tell them honestly that if they didn't like what was being done, they should find someone to support, or maybe even run yourself. And frankly, I realized I had to take my own advice. But the reason why I ran was out of principle. I can tell you unequivocally, when you hear people saying that the BC Greens want crop rep for power, you don't run as a BC Green when there would be no Green member elected in any provincial parliament anywhere in the country if your quest is for power. It's just doesn't hold water. But, you know, I ran because I believe our current system was not doing enough to represent the interests of the next generation. The intergenerational equity is a foundational principle of our party. That we need to think about the long-term consequences of the decisions we make today, not only about what it means for the next election, but what it means for the elections and beyond that, and for our children, and how it will play out in the decades ahead. Under proportional representation, I believe it's far easier for us to come together on the grand challenges of our time, to deal with issues like climate change, to deal with issues like poverty, to deal with issues like childcare, because we know that these issues matter to the people, and collectively, when we focus on our shared values, we focus on the people's values, and that is what we've been able to demonstrate over the last 18 months here in the legislature under the minority government. So it's a very exciting time. I'm absolutely blown away by this turnout. I spent the last 2 days in bed, frankly, and I didn't think I was going to make it here. But like, completely inspired me to get up here, and by looking at the people here, passionate about proportional representation. If we all do our part, talking to our friends, our co-workers, our family, volunteering like you're doing today, getting engaged on social media in a positive sense. We don't need the negativity. We've got enough of that happening from the No campaign. The positive values is what people want. They want to vote yes. They want to vote for hope. They want to vote for change, and they want to vote for the future. Let's just help them do that through expressing our positive values here. And finally, make sure everybody votes. Every single vote matters. Thank you to everyone for coming out today. It was a great turnout. I'll see many of you tomorrow in the legislature, and it's a great honor for me to be here. Thank you again for coming, and I look forward to going up here.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Now, I'm honored to introduce our next and final speaker. He's the leader of the BC NDP, the Premier of British Columbia, and a champion for making your vote count.